In the books of 2nd Kings and 2nd Chronicles, we hear about a boy named Joash who became king when he was 7 years old.
Wait. He became a king when he was 7? Like a second grader? That's right. It's a long story, but begins in the kingdom of Judah, where things were not going well at all.
The king of Israel, Jehu, had killed Ahaziah, who was king of Judah at the time. Ahaziah did not follow God and instead worshipped a fake god named Baal. Unfortunately, King Ahaziah had an evil and wicked mother named Athaliah, who took over as ruler of Judah after he had died. Athaliah also worshipped the Baal, the fake god.
God had promised that the kingdom of David would last forever. And now with Athaliah now in charge, it probably seemed like his plan was ruined.
Athaliah knew that God's promise was that David's descendants would always rule in the land of Judah, but she did not care and wanted to remain in power. She didn't care about God's promise or his plan. She had her own plan. So, she killed all of the descendants of David who could become king.
So it did look like God's promise to David that one of his descendants would be the savior God had promised would not come true. But nothing can stop God, and his promises never fail.
Athaliah had killed all of the heirs to David's throne except for one, a little 1-year-old boy named Joash. Uzziah had a sister named Jehosheba who followed God and was married to the high priest Jehoiada. Jehosheba hid Joash, who was her nephew, from Athaliah for 6 years. While Joash was in hiding, Jehoiada thought and prayed to God for how to remove Athaliah from the throne and make Joash king. God gave him a plan that would work, and when Joash was 7 years old, Athaliah was overthrown as queen and Joash became king. When this happened, the people also rededicated themselves to the Lord. Jehoiada helped Joash while he was king, and Joash followed God and trusted in what he said. He had the places where people worship Baal torn down. He put guards at the temple to protect it and made sure the priests and Levites were doing their jobs correctly.
So it appears that Joash fixed everything that Athaliah ruined. But there was another issue in Judah, a pretty big one.
When Athaliah had been queen, the temple that Solomon and the people built all those years ago had been mistreated and ignored. They had even used the temple to worship Baal instead of the one true God. The temple needed to be repaired. Joash's first plan was to use the money that the people gave to the priests to repair the temple, but the priests did not want to cooperate with this plan. So Joash came up with a different plan and had a large chest made. He set the chest outside the temple gates, and anyone who wanted to give money for the temple to be repaired could. And it worked. The temple was restored, and the Israelites had a king who was leading them to worship the one true God instead of fake gods.
Things appeared to be going great for God's promises now. Joash did a lot of good things for Israel, so people may have wondered if he was the savior God had promised. He was not, and unfortunately Joash's time as king ended very differently than it began.
After the temple had been restored, the high priest Jehoiada died. After that, Joash listened to bad advice and began to worship fake gods and allowed others to do the same. He even had Jehoiada's son, Zechariah, killed for speaking up about Joash's sin. But God's plan still would not be stopped. God had used Joash's time as king to do many great things, but his plan and his promise did not depend on Joash or anyone else but him. God did not abandon his people, even in their sin. And he still had an unstoppable plan to fulfill his promise to provide a savior who would save his people from their sin.
God always keeps his promises. He has never promised anything that he didn't mean, and he is always in control to make sure his promises come true. Years later, God provided the true king he had promised. He sent his only son, Jesus, to live on earth among his people. Jesus lived the perfect life that no other king or person could live. He gave up his life on the cross to set all people free from sin. The enemy of God, Satan, thought he had won when Jesus died. But as people all throughout history have learned, God's promises never fail, and people are part of God's promises. The promises that God has made through His Word are available for all people. And when someone truly trusts in Him, they receive the blessings of those promises.